This book, Think and Grow Rich, has gained critical acclaim from people the likes of Robert Herjavec of Shark Tank and motivational speaker Tony Robbins for being one of the greatest books for aspiring entrepreneurs or anyone else who wants to be wildly successful with any goal they have in life. Many claim this book holds the secret to massive success, financial or otherwise. I like to read a decent amount, and I am no stranger to business or self-help professional books. I mean, you can even see some right there, actually. I mean, these three are literally ones that I've read just in the past couple weeks. I know some of you might be thinking if you've read business books before, some kind of fall into the territory of garbage, and you have to really be careful about what you're reading because some people really are just out there to make a quick buck. And I am no stranger to reading those books only to find out that they're a complete waste of time. So this book gets more hype than any of those other business books I have ever read, and so I decided to set out, buy it for myself, and read it to see if it's really worth the hype. I actually found this book to be very helpful, and I know you will find value in it too. Otherwise this video wouldn't exist. But to be fair, some might see the cover of this book, Think and Grow Rich, as being a little bit gimmicky. I mean, and I can't blame you for that, right? I mean, it's got money around the outside, it's got a dollar sign in the middle, and it says Think and Grow Rich. I cannot blame you for thinking it might be a little bit on the gimmicky side. But I am very happy to report that it is not that at all. Some might see the title and assume it's only about money, which is fair, but that's also judging a book by its cover. That's a cardinal sin. While there is focus on wealth creation in this book, there is also a large emphasis on more the thinking and your habits and how they relate to any goal you have in life, monetary or not. And this book will be useful for whatever goal you have. And if that sounds interesting to you, let me tell you a little bit more. Think and Grow Rich is a culmination of Napoleon Hill's study to find out common threads between these massively successful people. People that were visionaries, the likes of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. Hill wanted to find commonality between all of these massively successful people to see if there were any rules. Essentially, could Hill find the blueprint to success? In a way, during his studies, he did find that. He describes them as his 13 steps to riches, and riches in this situation is either financial or any other goal. This video is not going to be a deep dive into every single rule and principle he lays out in this book, but I do want to go over a couple really important things that stood out to me, enough to hopefully convince you guys to read this book for yourself. Napoleon Hill starts off this book very strong. I was honestly skeptical when I opened it, but as soon as I turned to page 11, Napoleon Hill states that people are all too familiar with the word impossible, essentially claiming that everyone's mind thinks in terms of, I can't do this, I know this rule that won't work, where these massively successful people have framed it as finding rules that will work and sticking to those, trying to find a way towards I can versus I cannot. Hill's entire work in this book is about how to frame your mind towards positive, successful thoughts and becoming what he claims is success conscious in order to find success in whatever you want to do in life. And I really like that he starts off with something so bold, saying people are too familiar with the word impossible. Part of the reason Hill claims that some things may seem impossible is because there's a lack of focused desire. There are plenty of people who want to be successful and to want to do these amazing things, but what Hill claims separates the Bill Gates of the world from the average person is just a focus on their one specific desire. And with this desire, Hill doesn't claim you have to know everything about the field and have all of the knowledge. Rather, he claims that it's a lot more about doing and applying whatever knowledge you have, right? You don't have to know everything, but just get started with something and you will learn more than if you get stuck in what is known as kind of like an analysis paralysis, when you feel like you just need to know one more thing. And that trap is what Hill claims will keep a lot of people from ever pursuing anything of relevance to them. This one personally resonated with me a lot because before even starting something like this channel, I thought I had to have the best camera setup. I had to know all of the YouTube strategies. I had to watch every video I could on what's the best way to create a video. And what I really needed to just start doing, and as you can see through my channel history, it's starting to work, I just needed to be taking shots and uploading and learning over time. And so his statement on desire comes pretty early into the book, only 20 pages in. This is where it started to win me over, right? I'm very skeptical of books like this And now granted, this one has a lot of endorsement from the likes of very famous people, so that helps it a little bit, but I'm always skeptical of books that claim they can help you with your goals, because that is a commodity market in a way, people saying they have the answer to things when in reality they're just trying to sell you something. And this book happily is not that. Another cool thing about it is instead of saying there is some magic pill to take to become a successful entrepreneur or a successful salesman or to run a marathon, whatever your goal is, right? He claims, again, later in the book, that it's all about persistence. Persistence is one of the largest factors that contribute to the people he studied, right? These Henry Fords of the world, they were just more persistent than most other people. And when they hit failure, they took it as temporary defeat as opposed to the end-all be-all. Take Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of experiments before discovering the light bulb, which now is a part of everything we do. There's a light bulb there. There's a light bulb in front of me right now. There is light in everything. Humans need it every single day at all hours of the day. We couldn't do anything without it anymore. It's become so integral. And so imagine if Thomas Edison had stopped one experiment before, 10 experiments before, 1,000 experiments before, right? There is persistence that has to come before the success, is what Hill claims in this book. And that's a statement I really appreciate, is that he doesn't try and dress it up as if they are just magically smarter or they know something else. And while that could be true, they probably are smarter than the average person. It's not like they're doing anything superhuman. And it would be one thing if Hill had just said, you have to be persistent and you have to have a focused desire, right? These are all things that you can hear from just about anybody. But not only in this book does he talk about those principles, he also has these self-assessments almost every chapter where you can really focus on these 30 to 40 questions per attribute that ask detailed questions that if you honestly sat down with a pen and paper and answered them, you would have a much better understanding of where you're at in terms of every principle, and thus you would get so much closer to your goals. They're practical assessments that help you learn where you're at and then also the next step, which I think for a lot of people is where the struggle really is taking that next step. And something else that prevents people from taking that next step is criticism. That is something that is prevalent everywhere, and Hill mentions this a lot in the book. Hill claims that criticism is overly abundant in the world. And I'm sure any of you who have high aspirations and have thought about doing something big have always been met with someone who says, I don't know if you could do that, or how would you do that? There's always going to be a what if and a negative factor in anything you strive to do. And Hill's main takeaway with this, and he explains more in the book how to deal with it, is more or less you have to accept that that's going to be a part of the process of reaching your goals. And watch who this criticism comes from too. Napoleon Hill puts a large emphasis on who you surround yourself with is a very big factor. If you're around people who just want to tear you down and things like that, that's not going to be a good environment for you to reach your goals. There are a lot of really good statements in this book, but of course it can't all be great, right? Think and Grow Rich is a very catchy title, and there's bound to be something. This can't be the best book ever, right? Well, you would be correct. There are some moments in this book that I feel like could get a little bit on the preachy side of it's this way or no way. And I understand that obviously his book was written during the Great Depression. It's been revised since then with more relevant examples and, for clarity's sake. But there are definitely a couple moments in this book where I feel like things get a little too preachy without having it backed up. Most of this book is very well backed up with, okay, this is exactly what Henry Ford said, or this is what Andrew Carnegie said, or Charles Schwab. They all have backed up details, but there are a couple things that I feel like could have been explained in a different way, or perhaps better, or provide a little more nuance to it. And speaking of kind of nuance and emotions of the book, sometimes it gets a little too dramatic in terms of mentioning things like an ether and things like that. It kind of goes into the same thing, that some of it gets a little preachy and a little out there. But for the most part, all of these principles are extremely sound and have been tested by countless successful entrepreneurs, salesmen, business leaders, or any other goal that you could have. It's been tested by people in that field. And there's one simple fact that this book simply would not be as wildly popular as it is if it weren't the real deal. This book is legitimate. The principles mentioned in this book have stood the test of time, proving themselves over and over again in countless industries. And for all of these principles that Hill mentions, these 13 steps to riches, he encourages you to think critically for yourself about what that means for you. And he doesn't want you to just take everything on the page at point blank. It's all backed up. I think a lot of respect should be put on the fact that he allows people to challenge his ideas on these pages, and I think that actually adds more credibility to the work he has done over the years. He did almost 25 years of research on all of these entrepreneurs and business leaders, and it's culminated in just under 300 pages. In addition to that, every piece of advice in this book can apply to anybody. Every principle can be applied regardless of race, gender, or your upbringing. Think and Grow Rich can be applied to almost any field and for any audience, but I think it would be especially useful for those who want to be entrepreneurs. And while I did say it's not strictly for financial success, that is definitely a part of the book. So whether your goals are financial or not, I think this book is going to be a great option. It comes in under 300 pages, which that means it's not going to take up that much of your time, even if you haven't picked up a book in a while. No better time to start. This book ultimately boils down to a lot of very solid practical advice that is touted by many people. I wouldn't quite call it common sense advice because it does take some critical thinking to fully understand these, but it is something that you don't have to have all of the knowledge. It's just pick up what knowledge you can and start going, and then come back and fill in the pieces, right? That's exactly what he talks about in this book, and it applies to the book itself. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and as soon as I closed it, I felt inspired to actually start taking on the principles in the book, and I have noticed a positive difference since before and after. I want to leave it with one last quote that I found to be very powerful among any business book I have ever read. And that is that your desire for success must outweigh your fear of failure. I think it's a great statement because it exemplifies the temperance that this book shows with the statements it makes. It's acknowledging that you don't have to be fearless. Like, there is going to be fear in these goals and these endeavors that you take on, but it's a matter of wanting to succeed more than you're willing to fail. And it's recognizing that there will be setbacks and there will be complications, there will be the criticisms and things like that, and you will have slumps, but it's more about just wanting to be consistent and success will find its way towards you. I think this book actually falls into one of the best self-help books I've read. I think it has a lot of very practical principles, financial or otherwise. But especially for anyone who is struggling to start. If you know you have a goal, but you've just been struggling to get down and take that first step, which for many people is very common, this is the perfect book for you. So if that sounds like you, I would highly encourage you to pick up the book for yourself. You can pick it up on Amazon using the link below. I know it's a little bit different type of video from what I normally do, but I really wanted to talk about this book because I think it could provide so much value for anyone who is watching my channel. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video style, this book if you've already read it, or make sure to come back after you start reading this book and let me know if it helped you in any way. Also, if you have any good book recommendations, I read all of my comments. I want to know, I need more books to read. Subscribe if you're into making money, entrepreneurship, or anything else that's pretty cool like that. Consider clicking this video right up here if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about some other cool things, and like this video if you like money. Thanks, y'all.